Good morning, Shabbat Shalom. I'm Rabbi Ed Feinstein, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Valley Beth Shalom, live and online. This is Shabbos morning Torah study, joined this morning by my dear friends and teachers, Rabbi Sherre Hirsch of the American University, and Rabbi Marc Gellman, from currently in Aspen, Colorado, on his way to his new digs in Florida. Welcome. Good morning. Let's begin by wishing Sherry and Jeff a happy 20th anniversary. Many, many.
Okay, that's
Many
it.
blessings to you and to all the kids, and to your son Emmett, who is now beginning his yeshiva year in Yerushalayim. We wish him great things this year, and hoping that everyone has a wonderful year this year in your family. This morning we are going to look at the core service, the core prayer of the high holiday. So we're going to set aside Ki Tetzei, which is our Torah reading this morning, and look at the core high holiday prayer. This week we're working in earnest to get ready to celebrate our holidays. And because our holidays are going to be different than they've ever been before, because we're not going to be able to gather, we're not going to be able to fill the synagogue, we're not going to be able to be together with all the family and friends that we normally celebrate the Yontif with, I'd like to spend these days really working in earnest to get us ready as individuals to carry the burden, the weight, and the joy of the holidays. At the heart of the Rosh Hashanah liturgy, at the heart of the Rosh Hashanah prayer service, in the middle of the Musaf prayer, is the prayer that all of us come by that gives us a chill. It's called in the tradition Unetaneh Tokef, ascribe great holiness to God. It's a kavanah. It's an expansion upon the kedusha prayer, and it resolves itself into a refrain that everyone is familiar with. I'll put it here up on the screen so everyone can hear it. Berosh Hashanah yichatevun, uviyom Tzom Kippur yichatemun. On Rosh Hashanah it is written, and on Yom Kippur it is sealed. This prayer, if nothing else, is sung to a melody that is terribly familiar. Barosh Hashanah yichatevun, uvyom Tzom Kippur yichatemun. And my dear teacher of blessed memory, Harold Schulweis, used to always say that the nicer the melody, the more questionable the theology. So this is a melody we all sing, but as we reflect on the prayer, as we read the prayer, it's a chilling prayer. That on Rosh Hashanah, God opens this great book in heaven, as it were, and begins inscribing for all of us our destiny and our fate for the coming year and for the rest of our lives. That our lives are audited, our lives are inspected on Rosh Hashanah and on Yom Kippur, and that our destiny and fate is tied to our behavior and our performance in the past. And on Rosh Hashanah that is written, and on the 10 days between the two holidays we can litigate that decision, and on Yom Kippur it is sealed. And then the prayer, in order to make us really feel the terror of this judgment, begins to elaborate. Kama yavrun v'kama yivaerun. And there's a poetry to this. How many will pass away and how many will be born? Mi yichye mi yamut, who will live and who will die. Mi bekitzo, mi lo bekitzo, who in their time and who before their time or outside their time. And then all the ways that one can die, all the one that one can see one's life come to an end. Ba'eshu, b'mayim, b'cherev, b'chaya, by fire and water, by sword and beast, by hunger and thirst, by earthquake and plague. And Chanukah these are the capital punishments. Chanukah is hanging or strangling, and skila is beheading. Mi'anuach u'mi'anuah, who will find rest and who will go wandering? Mi shaket, who will have sheket, who will have quiet? Mi taref, who will be torn up, who will be tormented? Mi shalev mi taser, who will have tranquility and who will be punished or who will have punishment? Mi ani mi aser, who will go poor and who will be rich? Mi shafel, who will be cast down? Mi arum, who will be lifted up? And if you stop there, we'd be good Protestants. That's a good Calvinist prayer. God makes these decisions and your life is set forever. But the tradition then adds 7 words, which are meant to be a sort of nechemta, meant to be a sort of answer to this. Tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah. Tshuva is repentance or change or turning. Tefillah, prayer. Tzedakah is charity, giving, justice in the world. Mavirin et roa hagzera. They remove or mitigate the evil of the decree. This prayer always makes us shiver. I remember my mother used to leave the synagogue when this prayer was said. She'd find some excuse to go and check on the kitchen or check on the kids in the kids service. And I once asked her, where are you going? And she said, I can't say it. Lost too many family members lost in the Holocaust to say this prayer. I just simply can't pronounce this prayer. And I've had the same, I'm sure you've had the same experiences, Marc and Sherre, as a congregational rabbi, when people would say to you, I can't say the prayer. My loved one died this year. My loved one was diagnosed with a cancer this year. I've had a terrible year. I can't believe that this was God's judgment. I can't say the prayer. So what I'd like to ask you is how you pray this prayer, and what do you do with this prayer, and what we say to that person who says to us, this is not a prayer that I can even pronounce. Marc, you want to start? Help us understand how to say this prayer.
Well, I went through stages, I think we all do, on this prayer. Early in my life, I couldn't pray it either. I just felt it was obscene. The prayer was worse than wrong. It was obscene. So wait a minute. What's the point of our free will if everything is preordained? That's what the Calvinists believe, as you said, that there's a predestination. Who will be saved, who won't be saved, what will happen. And I couldn't pray it. Now, after I studied Buddhism for many years, I came to what I think is a more nuanced understanding of the prayer and its role in Judaism. The first thing to understand about Unetaneh Tokef is that it comes into a religious tradition that is not a philosophical tradition. Judaism, except for a few exceptions, and Maimonides being the towering exception, was philosophically illiterate. It didn't care what the Greeks were thinking about first principles or about the perfection and changeability of God and about free will. It didn't care about those things. It considered God omnipotent. Akiba, who was not philosophically sophisticated, but a great hero and a great scholar and inspiration, said, not even a sparrow falls from the sky that it wasn't ordained by God and God didn't know it. So that was basically the Jewish view. God controls everything, knows everything, and if you die, it's because it's your time and God ordained it. But there's another way to look at it, which I think is informed by the Hindu ideas of karma and the Buddhist notions of tanthakaya, which means release of attachment. And that way is this, that it is spiritually naive. One could even say it is criminally naive to believe that what we do in the world, how we act, has no consequences on our fate. That's just wrong. The way we act determines our fate. Our fate is, by and large, the sum of our choices. And if we make bad choices, we're going to have a bad fate. If you abuse your body and you get diseases, that's on you because you made bad choices. And you can't say, God, why did you take this wonderful person? Well, they ate fatty foods, they didn't exercise, and they didn't take care of themselves. It's hard to say that to someone who's grieving, and I never did. But if you're talking about the philosophical background of this monumental prayer, that's the truth. Karma is a truth. And if you look at the people you know, my proof for karma, my proof for this element of the prayer, that we do determine through God, who gave us free will, our future in the year to come. The proof for that is people we know. And I challenge people all the time to say, think of someone you know who's really living a morally corrupt life. You know what they're doing, you know how they're cheating their family, their business, or this or that. They have no moral focus, no moral compass, what I like to say, no moral north, no sense of what is right and wrong. And tell me, are their lives really happy? If you know this person well. And by and large, they say, no, they live miserable lives. They're always complaining. They're always worried that they'll be found out. So by and large, And then I asked them about the best people they know, the people who are most gracious and kind. I asked them, what kind of lives are they leading, those people, the best people, the good ones? And they say, well, my God, they're living wonderful lives. People admire them. They go to them. They love them. They revere them. And it's because of their karma, because they're constantly putting out goodness, kindness, and compassion. So what the Unetaneh Tokef means to me now is not that God has got some surprise for all of us behind door number 3, and we don't know what it is, but it's either, hello, you got skila, you got stoning, or you got drowning. Congratulations. Oh no, you hit the lottery, or you hit do not pass go, do not collect $200. Life is not monopoly, and karma is real. So philosophically speaking, I think Judaism had something that was deeply true that is reflected in this prayer, that it's hard to see at the beginning. And that's my view of it now.
Thanks, Marc. Sherre, tell me how you pray this prayer.
So I hear you, Marc, very clearly, and I respectfully disagree, because for so many years I prayed this prayer before my parents were diagnosed with cancer, and really from an intellectual place, like, I don't know that this is true, but I'm going to try and be the best person I can be, and hopefully I'm sealed in the book of life. And when my mother got sick, she was truly like salt of the earth. And she wasn't a person that followed liturgy, but she said to me, do you remember that prayer, sweetie, that we say every year at the high holidays? And I said, I knew exactly what she was referring to. She said, tell me exactly what I did to merit this criminal terrorist of a disease. She had brain cancer. And I said, Mom, it doesn't work like that. She's like, no, we've been saying that prayer for 60 years. And I am convinced there is something that I did. And she starts listing off all the things that she could claim to be sins that merited this punishment. And no matter what I said, no matter what I did, she was like, you know what, sweetie, that's the one. That's the one. And the fact that that prayer had set up that mental structure in her mind, that she was determined to figure out how she was responsible for being the victim of this disease, literally tore me to bits. And ever since then, I cannot say this prayer. And I love that Rabbi Shulwai says, like, the more profound the music, like the more uppity the music, the more profound the message. It's like, U'tefillah, U'tzedakah, and I hear everybody like chiming in, and I literally get nauseous now, because I used to be able to let my head overrun my heart, because I would just intellectualize, and now I can't, because I just think of that conversation of my mother and I sitting in her living room. She was paralyzed from everywhere on the left side except her left arm, and literally listing for me the possible sins that merited death in that year, which came to be. So I can't say, Eddie, with any sort of certainty that there is a certain actions that can prevent the decree. And there's, yes, bad behavior will lean towards another, but I know plenty of people that drink and do drugs and do all kinds, not that I have this whole group of people that I know, but I know plenty of people that abuse their bodies and do all kinds of things and are given another chance and another chance. And I know plenty of people that live perfectly healthy and their behavior has nothing to do with it. And they get randomly diagnosed with a headache that turns to brain cancer. So I don't buy it, Marc.
Okay, I understand that and I respect that. And there's two ways to respond, Sherre. The way that I would respond to you as a grieving daughter is entirely different than the way that I would respond to you if you were a student in my class of Religious Philosophy 101. The point of the issue of how we die and whether God has a role in it is not a discussion for mourners. It's a discussion for those who want to have a deep philosophical understanding of providence, of hashgacha, how God administers the world. And the truth of the matter is that the prayer does not say that the bad things in our life will be cast away and eliminated by tefillah, tzedakah. These things are not going to get rid of the bad things in our life. The hardest thing I have to do to teach potential theologians is for them to get rid of childish theology. And I don't mean this in any derogatory way. We all have it. I have it. And that is, we believe that good people should live forever and that death is a mistake. It's a betrayal.
I don't believe that at all. I
Right, I
don't
understand. But when you say your mother is dying of brain cancer, if you had a different view, which is that there are random olam kamin hago noheg, which is part of our deeper theology. The world goes.
translate that for our audience, please.
Yeah, I'm saying about to. That is that the world goes along by its own laws. The rabbis taught that too. So that brain cancer is part of God's will because it's part of a mechanism for making our brains stronger and more immune. And also, it's a warning sign. Some of the cancers that happen in our body are the result of pollution in the world and pollution in the food and things that we eat that aren't
I'm
right.
not objecting to that, Mark. What I'm objecting to is that she was spending an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out what she had done to bring this upon herself. Because the assumption of the prayer is that your behavior can affect the outcome. I'm fully with you that there is natural disasters and brain cancer and we don't live forever. And by the way, I don't think but what was killing me was her literally searching for what she had done to bring this on. And that was not a worthwhile endeavor. And I don't think it was a spiritual endeavor. And the bifurcation that you make between the philosophy student and the human being, I can't make that. We're just all human trying to get through. I can't. I'm not trying to teach this. I'm trying to live this.
There are things that you can teach in philosophy that you would not teach to a mourner. As the rabbis say, it is a mitzvah to teach what can be learned. It is also a mitzvah not to teach what cannot be learned. And
right, but I don't make that
mourning, you are not in a mood to hear some deep philosophical excursus about God's administration of the world. The reason that there is a connection between sin and death is the communal connection, which your mother didn't see. And that is, if I live in a world in which people are polluting the water and the land and the sky, and I move through that world without forcing our legislators to clean up the land and clean up the water and clean up the sky, and I know that the schmutz in the world is causing people to die of brain cancers and other cancers and all sorts of bad things, then in a certain way, we are dying because of our sin, but not individually, but collectively. So
well, let me jump in for a second, because first of all, I think the discussion is important, and it reflects the difficulty of the prayer and the controversy of the prayer, and you know the idea that two distinguished rabbis can read the prayer so very differently and respond so very differently, and that I think Marc's suggestion that just like there's situational ethics, there's situational theology. In different situations, the theology might find an appropriate ear, but that dealing with the suffering of someone that you love dearly is that this particular theology, this particular expression, is terribly destructive because it calls all this guilt to bear on the person. I think that's a very important observation. Let me suggest a different way to read the prayer, if that's okay. I mean, just a completely different way than what the two of you have offered. I want to go back to the prayer text for just a moment. In my encounter with this prayer, and ironically, Sherre, I had the same encounter from my mother. I mean, I had this argument with my mother in the hall of the shul because she wouldn't say the prayer. So I made two discoveries, and one's personal and one's textual. The personal discovery is, as a rabbi in a synagogue, I end up sitting in shul pretty much all day. And, by the middle of the day, and your head is rumbling and your belly is rumbling and you're sort of a little dreamy anyway, you begin looking at these texts in a different way. And one afternoon, late afternoon, as I'm kind of looking at the text in a sort of dreary way, I started reading it, and it suddenly occurred to me that the text is asking a set of questions here, right? But Rosh Hashanah Yechatev, and Rosh Hashanah it's written, and Yom Kippur it's sealed. How many will be born? How many will live? And then it says, who will live and who will die? So take that as a question. Well, who will live and who will die? And the answer is me. I was born, and someday I'm going to die. Mi bekitzo, mi lo bekitzo. Who in their time and who not in their time? Well, everyone dies in their time, and everyone whose life is significant dies before their time. Mi ba'eshu, mi b'mayim, mi b'cherev, who by fire and water and by sword. And in a certain metaphorical way, every one of us experiences every one of these things. So my first discovery, my first suggestion about this prayer, and I do not for a moment suggest that this is what the author of the prayer meant, but I think it's a legitimate reading of the prayer. What the prayer is saying to us is, all of us are subject to these things, all of us. And that therefore, none of us has any choice in the matter. There is the set of circumstances of human being, what we call the human condition. Much of the human condition and the things that matter most about the human condition are out of our control. We don't decide when we're going to be born. We don't decide to die. We don't decide to get sick and get well. We don't decide what's going to happen to us. Yes, Marc is exactly right. We make choices, and sometimes, and always, those choices come with consequences. But we all know people, we all know ourselves that things happen that are completely outside of the choices that we brought upon ourselves. This is a recognition of a terrifying truth. And the terrifying truth is we don't control a whole lot of the conditions of our own existence. And we pretend we do. We spent the whole rest of the year, except for the 3 days of the high holidays, walking around thinking, I am the captain of my ship. I am the author of my destiny. And the prayer comes to say, not really. You didn't get to choose your parents. You didn't get to choose the home you were born into. You don't get to choose whether you're sick or whether you're well. You don't get to choose how many days you have living on this world. There's a whole lot that's out of your control. And for just a moment, that is, in fact, a terrifying reality. Now, let's take the part that bothers Sherre so much. Tshuva tefillah tzedakah mavirin et roa hagzera. It turns out, and there's my textual discovery, that wasn't the original prayer. The original text statement comes from the Talmud, and that it was the original girsa, the original version of the prayer in old machzors, because I looked this up, was tshuva tefillah tzedakah mivadlina tagzera. Tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah, repentance, prayer, and tzedakah, and charity or justice, cancel the decree. Now, the guy who wrote that believed that, yeah, you can litigate the decree and God will change God's mind. God might change God's mind. And then conversely, the terrible dilemma that Sherre had to face, when a beautiful soul is taken from the world, that person says, well, what didn't I do? I mean, how much tshuva and tefillah and tzedakah should I have done in order to avert this decree? That was the original theology. That was the original prayer. But that's not what this says. They changed the prayer. And I know when they changed it because I see the history of the Machzor. It was during the Middle Ages when Jewish life was impossible. And it no longer says mivatlina tagzera. It says mavirin et roa hagzera. It mitigates the evil or the difficulty of the decree, the pain of the decree. Now, wait a minute. What's the decree? What's the decree? Is the decree my own individual fate, that I live and die, that I have these things happen to me? Or maybe what the prayer means by the decree, the gezerah, isn't my individual fate, but my human condition. The human condition itself, the fact that I don't control all the conditions of my own existence. And then the prayer says something kind of interesting. You live in a world in which you don't control everything. And there's only 3 things in the world you really do control. Tshuva means you control your own character. Tefillah means you control the way that you express your faith and your sense of what the world is and the community that you gathers around you. And tzedakah means that you can mitigate a little bit. You can make the world a little more gentle today. You can cure a disease today. You can feed a hungry child today. You can mitigate some of the difficulty. That you can change, but you can't change the human condition. And the prayer then is a sort of existential prayer which says, I recognize my powerlessness to control all the conditions of my existence, and I have to accept that. But there are things that are mine. No one can tell me what kind of person to be in the world. That's my decision. That was Viktor Frankl's great thesis, that even in a concentration camp, you don't have to turn into a monster. I can gather friends around me and pray, and we can share together and cry together when we're sad and celebrate together when we're glorious. And tzedakah, I can make this corner of the world a little more benign. Now that's a different, I acknowledge from the outset, that's not what the prayer originally meant. But you know something? That makes it possible for me to say the prayer. That's how I say the prayer. Colleagues?
Well, it still comes back to Sherry's brilliant and searing and life-altering question that her mother asked. And that is, am I dying because I did something to merit my death? That's the question your mother was asking. And there's only two answers to that. Yes, you did something that merited your death, either as a member of an advanced industrial society that pollutes the world and introduces carcinogens all over the place. That's one sort of tradition of answering. Mom, I know this is hard for you to understand, but we all have put death-producing chemicals into the world, and one of them bit you, okay? So that is a level of responsibility. The other is, you did nothing, but what is difficult is that your expectation is that when you do good deeds, you will be rewarded with a long life, a long and healthy life. Nowhere in Judaism, in serious Judaism, biblical Judaism, unfortunately, is full of verses that say exactly this, but in real Judaism, God does not promise you reward for righteousness. Ben Azai is the ultimate teacher in this, in Pirkei Avot. Schar mitzvah mitzvah, the reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. So the point is that expecting that a life of goodness, of kindness, of gratitude, of prayer and tzedakah will produce X number of extra years of life is false and naive and childish. And when I say why there's a difference, Sherry, I would never say that to a mourner, but I would say it to a student in a theology class. So there's really, you get to decide which path do you want to go down. The path that says, we don't do these good deeds to get more life. We do them because they're good. And anything else is, as Eddie says, just part of things we don't control in the basic situation of human finitude. That's it. And the other course is that, no, there is some culpability in our life, and that's what people in the green movement and other movements of conservation and cleaning the world, that's what they're saying. They're saying, don't take such a narrow view of your life. I'm good, therefore I should continue to live, blah, blah, blah. There's a third way, which is fascinating, and for people who really want to explore it, I do explore it with them in my teaching, and that is that your mother perhaps was already benefited because of her goodness. There are many examples of the length of life of King David, and he gave up some time to Adam so that he could live a longer life. There's all sorts of rabbinic midrashim on this, but basically, we don't know if our life was supposed to end when we were a child, and God gave us extra years, or our life was supposed to end when we were 40, but because of our goodness, God gave us another 40 years. How do we know that that didn't happen? How do we know?
It's really interesting that you said that, Marc, because when you presented the first two, I was like, there's a third option, which is what my mother came to, which is really powerful in that she never did good in order for the expectation of long life. She always thought every year was a bonus, like the cherry on top. And she even reconciled that she didn't die in an instant, that God was giving her the blessing of being able to say goodbye to everybody, because she thought this was all bonus, right? But it didn't take away from the fact that she held guilt for something that she might have missed. And she was scanning every day to figure out, what did I miss? She fully felt all of this was a bonus. She said to me, after 40, I felt the whole thing was a bonus. But it was that sense of her scanning every day. And literally, I'd walk in and she'd be like, maybe it's this, Sherre. I mean, that's how a morning would start off. And I would think, and you know how I would answer? Mom, hold that thought. I'm going to get a pint of Haagen-Dazs at 5:30 in the morning. And I would take a bite and she would take a bite. And she lost 10 pounds and I gained 10 pounds, right? During that time, because it was so painful to hear her scanning for not the transactional gift that she had been giving, but for the reason that she should be blamed, that she should be the one blamed.
Yeah, it's a very painful thing. It's a very, very painful guilt.
Very different, Marc, than what you're saying. She didn't think, oh, I do good, that's where I'm going to live a long life. She thought after 40, everything was a bonus check. She always taught me that. Everything after 40 is a bonus. It's that she couldn't figure out what it was. She had a whole bunch of sins that she named sins and kept thinking, this is the one, this is the one, this is the one that I didn't address, that I didn't do right, that I didn't take care of fast enough. And that was what was painful.
All right, so Sherre, so help us. This is a beautiful observation. And first of all, she did have a reward. I mean, the reward is she has a fabulous daughter who became a worldwide teacher of Torah and deeply loved. And your mother was deeply loved. I mean, there were all of us around her during those days because she had earned all that love and affection and devotion, you know.
And I thank you, Eddie, and not to make it about my mother, but
so talk about your mother. It's a nice thing to talk about your mother because I miss her. So
funeral, I can still remember it word for word because I think people really knew her because she was so vulnerable, because she lived life very vulnerably.
So here's the question I want to ask you, though. I want to ask you this. I want you to answer this question then. So we've heard Marc's theology articulated now. Take this observation from the ordeal that your mother went through, and your objection to the prayer, and now tell us as we're going into the high holidays. So how does Rabbi Hirsch do the high holidays? When you approach all of the themes of the holiday of judgment and sin and repentance, what do these holidays mean to you, given the experience you had with your mom? I
love doing these high holidays with people. And if you've done the high holidays with me, as I have a whole group of people that have done them with me when I was at Sinai and other places, I talk about this a lot. The words are the springboard. They are not the destination. And if you get trapped in the words, then it is really painful to be in this liturgy, whether it's the kingship, whether it's the maleness of it, whatever it is, it's very limiting. But if you see them as a springboard, of a very high springboard that you're jumping off in order to have a powerful and deep relationship with something greater than yourself, and to understand how little control you have, and to have a full day of acknowledgement of that, then the language doesn't limit you. And I talk a lot about it when I pray with people, because otherwise the language itself and the prayer book itself is like, it's limiting, just like language is limiting. And so to me, that's not the beginning. The goal isn't to get through all the prayers, say them all, make sure you believe them all. The goal is to use them as a springboard to leap into this place of connected and spiritual, devekut, which is cleaving to God.
So thank you. But so as we're reaching the end of our conversation this morning, I want to reiterate a question I asked last week. But for this new week coming up, we're now 3 weeks out from the holidays. I'd like you to give us some homework to help us get ready for the Yontif, for the holiday. This year, as we've said many times, the burden, the task, the work of the holiday really devolves upon us Jews, because although the rabbi may project a sermon on Zoom or on Facebook Live, The work of doing the yontif is not going to be coming to synagogue, sitting in a comfortable seat and listening to the cantor sing and the rabbi preach. This year, we're going to have to do the work ourselves. So to help us get ready to do the work, as it were, the searching and work of the holiday, give us something we can do this week to begin the intense work of the of Rosh Hashanah. Marc, you want to start? What would you have us do this week?
Meister Eckhart, the great medieval mystic, early modern mystic actually, and he said, if the only prayer we ever say is thank you, it will be enough. If the only prayer we ever say is thank you, it will be enough. So I'm asking people to do in their pre-yontif meditation a thank you meditation, where you just daven in your own mind a list of thank yous. Just thank you. In Zen Buddhism, it's called Nikon. This is a gratefulness technique, discipline. But we have it in Judaism, and Christianity through Meister Eckhart and others have it. And that is, thank you. That's in Judaism, the source I use is the rabbis say in the Messianic time, all the sacrifices will be abolished, except for the Thanksgiving sacrifice. That will continue. So the idea that there'll be an end to the need to say thank you, even in the Messianic age, is false. There's always a need for thank you, and that is the preparation I'm urging people to take onto themselves, to make a personal list of thank yous, which will help balance the kinds of deep, corrosive thoughts of guilt that Sherry's mother, for example, had, which can be so painful and difficult for the person dying and also for the family.
Thank you, Marc. Sherre, give us some homework to get ready for yontif.
So, as you know, I often say, when we pray, we speak to God. This is a famous quote in Jewish tradition, but when we study, God speaks to us. So every morning I study one Mishnah from Mishnah Rosh Hashanah. You're not going to do that, but you may and I do it with Hadar. So if you want to do that, you can go to hadar.org and learn a Mishnah every day at 8 to 8:30 in LA time. You could also read a Jewel from Elul from Craig Taubman's thing. You could also listen to one of VBS's amazing moments where they have a different spotlight. What I say to people is have some 3 minutes set aside each day to have a heart-to-heart with the divine. However you do that, if that means going down to the beach and literally screaming at the water, if it means doing something that enables you to say, I segment this time every day, whether it's blowing the shofar every day, but I segment the same time every day to go out of my frame of my life to acknowledge that I'm not in control and I don't know what will be, but I want to be in dialogue about this conversation. And if you do that every day for 3 to 5 minutes, I mean, literally 240 or 280 seconds, like nothing, there's something that you come to Rosh Hashanah different. Blow the shofar every day, do something, study something, pick a book to read, just something that allows you to break the cycle of here's my life, and then I come to the high holidays to pray. It's like, here is your life. Let's just talk about having some relationship with something other on a daily basis and start now.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I'll add just one more. Each of these are beautiful suggestions and important exercises to get us ready. It is a positive commandment of the Torah that we have to hear the sound of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. And that's why the bracha that we're going to say is Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar. We are commanded to hear the sound of the shofar. And so there is an interesting Mishnah, actually a goofy Mishnah, a goofy species of Jewish law in the original code of Jewish law from the year 200. And it asks this question. Suppose you're walking down the street, and suppose you pass by a synagogue, And suppose you inadvertently, accidentally, not on purpose, unintentionally hear the sound of the shofar while you're walking down the street. Does that count? Can you inadvertently fulfill the commandment? And the rabbis give a really interesting answer. It's a silly question, but the answer is deeply profound. It goes like this: Im kivein libo yatsa, im lav lav. Im kivein libo. If he, or if the person who listened to the sound of this or heard the sound of the shofar, kivein libo means to direct at his heart. If he really listened, if he listened intentionally, if he listened deliberately, that counts. But if he didn't, if he just heard it without really listening to it, if it was just a casual hearing without an intentional listening, it doesn't count. Now that's profound, because there's a difference then between hearing something and really listening to it. The inadvertent or natural hearing, which is simply a physiological reflex of sound in the room, in the area, is very different than turning one's mind and one's heart, one's being, toward a voice, toward a sound, and really gathering it in. To listen with kavanah, to listen with intention, to listen with concentration, to listen deliberately. That's what this exercise of hearing the shofar is meant to teach us. I think it's kind of interesting that the holiest words in the whole tradition are 6 words from the book of Deuteronomy: Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Now everybody concentrates on the end, Adonai Echad, monotheism, the heart of our tradition, or Adonai Eloheinu, the idea of a faith in God. But what about the first 2 words? Shema Yisrael, listen, Jews, listen up. And if you have a mezuzah on your door, that's the first thing you see. The first word in the mezuzah says Shema. You come into the house, listen. And right underneath the Shema is the word Ve'ahavta, and love. Read it vertically, not horizontally. Listen and love. But you have to really listen. It's got to be deliberate listening. So this week, go to the people you love and listen to them. I have this perennial fight with my wife. I can tell you what it's about, but that's private. But instead of fighting and getting defensive, and we're all, especially men, we're so good at being defensive. Because we were taught since little boys that you got to win. When I train young men and young women to become husbands and wives, brides and grooms, I always try to teach them how to lose arguments. It's really hard. Young men are really hard at this. I have a hard time with that. As I teach them these simple words, you might be right. You might be right. So next time you're having that fight, instead of winning, stop and turn to your spouse and say, wait. I'm going to sit here for the next 6 minutes and listen to you. Tell me what you're trying to say. And then repeat back what the person said. Go to the people that you're with all the time and just say to them, talk to me. I want to hear. Make this a week of listening. If it's a week of listening, I guarantee you'll have the experiences my 2 friends and colleagues here are having. You'll be thankful for the relationships that have wandered in your life, the way that Rabbi Gellman has taught us. And you'll find God present in the days of your life, as Rabbi Hirsch has taught us. Sherre, happy anniversary. Marc, a good Shabbos to you. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to all of you. Shana Tova. We'll continue our learning every Shabbos at 10 o'clock in the morning, at 9 o'clock in the morning, of course, and 10 o'clock, if you stay tuned, davening, Shabbos morning davening. Tonight, Havdalah, of course, at 8 o'clock, at 8 o'clock or 8:30? 8:30. And all week, preparation for holiday. Wednesday night, we have Yontif University. I'll be teaching Lunch and Learn on Wednesday afternoon. All week, if you'll check valleybestshalom.org and look at the VBS schedule, all of the preparations for the holidays. Sherre would ask me to have you check Biachad at the AJU, American Jewish University, for the wonderful offerings of Jewish learning and personal development that they're offering. And Marc, I wish you a wonderful, great week teaching and getting ready for the holiday and enjoying the beautiful mountains of Aspen. To all of you, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.